Hello and welcome to the FEZ show. I'm your host, Jack Giordmaina, and it's the 27th of May 2020, one day on from the madness of yesterday, which saw Daniel Abt lose his seat at Audi, and that caused uproar if something virtual should end a driver's career. Daniel Abt brought out a video statement explaining his actions and why he did it, and we'll get into that in a second. With me today to dissect Formula E's biggest ever story, I think we can say that, is Edward Hunter and Jack Pickering. And also, we have friend of the show, Remco Majoor, to give a sim racer's view of what has been going on. Morning, boys.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, great to have you all on. Thank you so much. Obviously, I said in the intro there that this is the biggest story in Formula E's history. Like, Ed, would you go along with that? I think we have to now.
It's certainly the biggest sim racing story by far, and I think the only one that ever really holds a candle to it in terms of controversy would be the Vegas e-race, in terms of it being a mess and it getting a lot of attention because there was a lot of money on the line. In this case, it's more of a charity thing, which makes it in some ways even more controversial. But yeah, I think there's a strong case to be made. Personally, I think some of the racing things have been more memorable to my mind so far, but this certainly in terms of affecting a driver's career, I mean, wow.
I know, I suppose there's been some big stories in FE, Jack, but I think this one takes the biscuit. Like, this has gone everywhere. Like, people who never talk about Formula E are somehow now talking about Formula E. There's drivers that have probably never talked about Formula E who are now talking about Formula E. It's just mental.
Yeah, no, something that I'd like to point out is that what happens behind the scenes, we do the show here on Zoom, and then we go back into Discord, and then we chat for about 20 minutes afterwards. Some of us, I think it was Thursday last week, we said, it's okay, the show's coming to a natural end, we won't do that many shows this week because there isn't that much news. Boy, has that changed over the weekend. So,
Well,
it is, it is absolutely insane. But yeah, no, we have had so many people talking about Formula E that wouldn't. It's just genuinely just mind blowing. That this is just absolutely blown up to the state where I didn't expect it to get this big, but I expected it to get relatively big after what we saw on Sunday.
I don't think Daniel Abt expected to be that big either, Pico.
No.
But to be fair, like, over this lockdown period, we've done really well to sort of get topics out, discuss things Formula E, because there hasn't been that much news. And then the week that we decide, look, we're going to slow down now, life is going back to normal. Like, life is going back to normal, people going back to work, assignments and all that's affecting everyone here at FEZ is all going on at the moment. So we thought it would be best. But then obviously then FE decide, you know what? We'll have the biggest news week in Formula E's history on the week you decide to stop doing the FEZ show. But we're still here. You can't keep us down. But what I want to bring into, obviously, is I want to sort of start talking about Abt's video statement and the things that he said. So Remco, I suppose you'd agree with this, is, the first thing he said is that it wasn't fun anymore. He wasn't having fun. He was turning up each week. The driving standards weren't great. And that, for him, took the fun out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the sim racers race, I participated in two of them. The first one was with sim racers who know what they are doing, who know how the game works. And in the second one, I was more backward in the grid, and I was suddenly confronted with real racing drivers. It's just that difference is so massive that after like the first time I got hit by that Formula E driver, I was instantly like, why do I care? Because because of the format that's being used, you're instantly out of the game when someone crashes you. And with Formula E, the driver's grid, you can definitely see that in the first turn, it's usually a mess. Even at Berlin, I watched it back. In the first lap, it wasn't as big of a problem because the track was way wider, but you saw someone just plowing into the rear of the field, almost not braking. And I understand that people won't take serious if someone else does that to you.
And I suppose, Remco, like, lots of the drivers have come out, like, even, Vern came out and he said, obviously, like, driving these cars, they're not realistic, and therefore that means that the drivers don't care, therefore they're using people as brakes to actually slow down, which, people were saying, like, Nick de Vries, Jerome D'Ambrosio, they say, just use them as brakes to slow down so they can try and get past. And then that creates this sort of bubble of it not being fun and it not being serious, and therefore when you're doing something for 8 weeks and you've lost interest by week 3, things start to slip.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, yeah. There's not much more to say to that. That the car isn't the same as real life, but that's in any simulator. Try to simulate as close as possible, but it's never going to be the same. So I know someone from another simulator. They have the IndyCar guys on there. They literally said, even though they are trying to simulate it, once we jump in, it's a different car, and that's how you should treat it. And if you treat that seriously, it's going to be a fun race, and everyone is going to have fun. But if you are not going to take it seriously, it only takes one drive to not take it seriously, and it just gets a chain reaction to the other drivers, and suddenly it's not fun for anyone anymore.
Yeah, I suppose, like, at the end of the day, Ed, it is a game. Like, it is a game, and whatever car you've got in front of you, you just have to adapt and drive it as fast as possible. Yes, it's not going to be as realistic as Formula E car. I don't think any sim, will ever probably get a car exactly right where a driver goes, you know what, unless, of course, unless they're virtual sims that they use in the factory, but, those are, you've got the data left, right, and centre to plough into those. But in terms of actual, like a game like R Factor 2 iRacing, I don't think any car will be exactly the same. So you just adapt and you drive to what you can do and try and have the best time as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a bit of accessibility in this, and that even in R Factor, where there's a lot of realistic elements in there, there's many as they could put in. It's never going to be exactly the same as the real car, and I think that's in terms of getting people sim races or even just normal people to actually be able to drive it. I think that's actually positive in terms of it's not sort of something where you have to be an amazing real life racing driver. No, there's more of a sort of openness, and that means we get sim races and Formula E drivers to compete. I think what it really highlights for me is that the Formula E drivers event should not have been the main event. The main event should have been the sim race champ, because the racing in that, and I'm sort of giving credit to Remco here, has been consistently of a higher standard in terms of we saw Hong Kong where Joshua Rogers and Lucas Miller were running side by side for several corners. That really stood out to me as showing just how much higher the racing the standards are in terms of drivers going side by side without barging into one another. And I don't think you ever saw anything that good in the Formula E drivers race. And sim races race, that's of course where the prize is as well. It would have made way more sense to make that the championship and have the Formula E drivers race. No points, no championships, just you do the races for fun, and no one cares if people crash each other out or indeed use ringers to drive for them.
The thing is, right, that I really take away from his statement was that he wanted to get caught. Like, he wanted to get caught. Well, I say he wanted to get caught. That's probably a bit too harsh. But he didn't hide it. Put it that way. He didn't hide it. Like, the situation, Jack, was actually brought up, on his live stream with Lorenz. There was over 1,000 people watching this, and they were discussing it. And then when they were obviously discussing it as a joke, but then they realized, you know what? Why not? Why not? Should we actually pull this practical joke in a sense?
Well, yeah, I think I see the reasoning behind it, but I think one thing they kind of missed out on, and I think is something that Ed pointed out before we started the show, is if everyone was in on it, apart from the fans, then it would have been fine. It would have been a gotcha moment, as he put it. I think that would have been fine. But no, the fact that it was just him and Lorenz that chose to do this, it did make it seem a little bit like cheating. I mean, yes, his aim was to be caught, but it just didn't work out in the way that he wanted to. And so there are things that could have been done in terms of how to make this situation better. But yeah, the way that it was executed just made it. If he just said 2 hours after the race, be like, I got a sim racer to drive for me as a joke, please disqualify me, or something like that, then I think it might have been taken in a little less, in a little more light-hearted mood. Because one thing that he did address in the video is that the media did blow this up, I think, to an extent where it did say he has been cheating, whatever. So yeah, I think had he come out with it before the press had got to it, it would have been fine. But yeah, I think if everyone in Formula E in the race home bubble was in on the joke, then the whole gotcha moment at the end, then they would have been fine. It would have been fine.
Because I suppose, right, let's just address that cheater thing, right? Because obviously we're part of the media in terms of, to be fair, like we've done tons of videos, we've done news stories, you know, we've called him a cheater. You know, I'm not going to say we haven't, but at the same time, you know, when you address that of what he's done, like he is effectively cheating to get a better result, despite what he says. You know, he said in that thing, it wasn't about getting a good result. It wasn't about getting a good result. He didn't care about a good result. There was nothing for him to financially gain from it. Okay, but in effect, what he did in that charity race was cheat to get a good result because he wasn't driving. So by any form of you not driving to improve your performance is cheating. But he did say in the video where he accepts that people will say that. But I think sadly for Daniel, there was no other way that he could hide what he had done in terms of, and what other name you could call it. But Remco, what I really want to discuss is that he was texting the drivers. He was dropping hints effectively that, he wasn't driving. And we mentioned the serious drivers, Formula E drivers that is, with the likes of Stoffel Van Dorn, who can do well, Oliver Rowland potentially, Pascal Wehrle, Maximilian Gumpfer, who, have taken to the series, who have done quite well. And it was Van Dorn who was really the first one that sort of said, this isn't Abt driving. And maybe those texts sort of, alerted Van Dorn to when he did that quick qualifying time that, okay, this is an Abt. And then, because he's putting a lot of time and effort into it and is actually quite quick, because he's taken it seriously, he took more of offence to that and then ousted, Abt when it came to the podium press conference interviews at the end.
Yeah, what I think, going back to what Edward said, Formula E made this seem like a serious event, but for sim racers, that's very easy to do. Sim racers have taken this seriously for a very long time. Real racers have never done that. Of course, what Abt said in his own video, some take very seriously, a lot of them don't. So I think what actually went wrong here was Formula E themselves, putting it out to the public as a very serious event for sim races. That's the main event. But in the end, the drivers themselves were not in on that. They didn't think the same. And that's why Abt, of course, thought I'm doing a practical joke, which would totally have been okay if this was just like, the serious sim racers have gone, now let's have the fun Formula E drivers event. And what I think, the Van Dorn, the Roland, that really took it seriously, they would probably have had more fun if they joined the challenge grid with the sim racers. So I don't think it's all on Abt either, but still, in the end, he cheated in a charity event, and that on itself is bad.
Yeah, Remco, it's a good question that we've had, and I've asked the boys multiple times, and this would have been my championship, is that you would have had a mixture very similar to the F1 virtual GP, where they have, some Formula 1 drivers, obviously they have influencers, they don't have like sim racers in that because they have their own sim racers, but instead of the influencers, you could have put yourselves, like Kevin Siggy and that, into the race with the Formula E drivers that wanted to take part. And then you could have had your influencers as well, like like your Charlie Martins in that race, and just have one big race. And, the best sim racer in the championship, because the Formula E drivers are pretty good, they would then get that prize. And you'd have one big race with people who actually want to do it, rather than having a separate race with then some people who just get invited to do it, which then ruins the experience for the sim racers. And then 24 FE drivers where you've got maybe half of them who... I feel for Brendan Hartley, like if he doesn't want to do it, the poor guy's got to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
It's just, why would they do it this way? But I think there's also part of it that they don't want to show that sim racers could be quicker than real racers. But then again, I've seen the lap times they were doing. They were insanely quick. They were so competitive. It would actually have been like a positive thing for the Formula E drivers to show like, these Formula E drivers can jump into a world which is completely different, which is still, it has the same like kind of skill, being put to the test, and they are instantly competitive. They should have used that, but they didn't. It just frustrates me.
Yeah. Jack, obviously, we talked about it on Monday, and I put the point out. I said, is Abt's FE career over? And you looked at me like, nah, it can't be. Like, for this? Are you serious? This is what's going to end his FE career? And I was like, well, he's put himself at risk. And you said no at the time. So now that he has gone, and it looks like his racing career is pretty much done, unless he might go stateside, because I reckon he could probably get away. America they've got great series in America, but then their drivers, their teams, don't mind this. So maybe he might be able to resurrect his career in America. But were you expecting him to lose his seat?
No. I think that's just a firm no. I would, and also thank you for pointing out what I said on Monday and bringing it up today. I feel so great about that. Yeah, wonderful. But no, it was it was a very big surprise to me when that came out about midday yesterday. But yeah, I thought maybe like a slap on the wrist, or maybe something a bit like how Clarkson left the BBC, like once his contract expired, then they wouldn't renew it or something like that. But no, he went for full on suspension, which was quite surprising, I think. But yeah, I think it goes back to the fact that it was a charity race. I think it was just, if it was a fun race for like no reason whatsoever, then no one would have cared. No one's like, nice joke, Daniel. Yeah, but yeah, no, I think, and then like you need to think about like other people who have like lost their seats. So yes, it's happened in NASCAR, but that was for something very, very much worse in my opinion, and I think the opinion of basically everyone in the world. But at the same point, you look at other people who have lost their drives for something in the real world. You saw Santino Ferrucci a couple of years ago. Got kicked out of F2 for playing on his phone whilst in a race or something, and then being racist towards his teammate or something. And now he's doing very well in IndyCar. I'm guessing the praise of the NBC IndyCar team. And then as I brought up on Monday, the whole Romano Fenati thing in Moto2, when he pulled the brake lever of Stefano Manzi, and then he was back in Moto3 or like less than a year later.
There's a lot of support though, Ed, for Daniel Abt on Twitter and on social media. There's a lot of people who are saying, you've got DaCosta and Collado and potentially more who maybe just not said it on Twitter, who said, we're not streaming anymore. We're not going to put ourselves at risk of losing our seat. And, that's not a good sign straight away for the Race at Home Challenge, because obviously they wanted everyone to be on Twitch, all the drivers on Twitch. You've got people like Alexander Sims, who probably didn't even know what Twitch was a couple of weeks ago on Twitch. And, for me, obviously them not streaming isn't going to get Abt's seat back. I think if they really wanted to make a statement that, drivers shouldn't be losing seats for practical jokes, in this, they maybe shouldn't turn up on Saturday, and that would obviously cause Formula Racing problems, but I don't think that would happen. But I find it interesting that there is a lot of support out there for him, and drivers are basically stopping Twitch streaming, saying, well, we're not just going to do this anymore. You want us to do this, but we ain't going to do it anymore.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a crazy situation, because Formula E just gave out the 10,000, or was it 9,000 and a little bit euro fine? 10,000. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 10,000 that he gave to charity of his choice, which you mentioned in the video, which is a charity he'd worked with before for disabled people. And Formula E sort of left it at that. Okay, you paid the fine, we've disqualified you from the race and taken away your points, and we've also banned Lorenz, and they were happy to leave it at that. And then Audi were the ones who decided, because this has turned into such a big story. And also, I think this is worth pointing out that the big thing about Volkswagen Audi Group is Dieselgate, that there was a story that's come back out in the media recently where they lost a court case related to Dieselgate. So this is a time, I don't think that's the reason directly, but I think it's definitely a time where Volkswagen Audi Group are sort of they don't really need another bad story right now, and the timing of this really for Abt could not really come at a worse time, to be honest, in terms of what's happening to Audi at the moment. And so the reaction from the drivers of just saying they won't do streaming anymore. I think there's a couple of different ways you could take it, but I thought it was just a sort of if we're taking this seriously now, then I'm going to turn off the stream and keep the fans out, basically, because I'll just do this just as a job, even though I don't want to do it, basically, is the sort of admission there, and not necessarily, I don't want to get caught like Abt did, because I don't think they were cheating in the first place. It was only Abt who was doing it, although I can't prove that.
I think they're worried. I honestly think, Jack, that they're just worried. They're worried that they will say something on their stream that they shouldn't have said, by accident, and they could end up losing their seat. And I think, well, maybe they're now evaluating their own risk and reward by streaming and thinking, if I say this through the fit, like, I'm going to go back to the Bubba Wallace thing in NASCAR, rage quit. I can't remember what he did, but the story of that was that he rage quit and he lost his sponsors for his NASCAR team just by rage quitting.
He lost a sponsor. It wasn't like all of his sponsors. It was only one. But he kept racing after it. It wasn't a big deal.
Of course, he wouldn't have lost his racing seat from that. From obviously, if he actually lost his racing seat from rage quitting, I think that would spark something more massive than what we are seeing here in the Formula with Daniel Abt. But my point is, though, that if they do say something that might potentially lose them a sponsor or lose them a race seat, then they're like, what, I'm not going to do this anymore, and you can understand that.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense for them to do that. I think it's not just that. We've seen the NASCAR driver. I keep on forgetting his name. NASCAR driver Kyle Larson, who dropped the N-bomb on Twitch. So yeah, no, it at the end of the day, it does make sense for them to do that. But yeah, no, it is disappointing because the Twitch viewers were higher than the actual Formula E streams. For Formula E, that's like pluses and minuses. I think the plus is now that they're going to get more people on the YouTube stream. The minus is that they still would probably get more if they had different streams up on Twitch. But yeah, no. At the end of the day, I think this will detract from it. Detract from the whole Race to Home challenge if everything hasn't been detracted already. But yeah, no. It's disappointing because having these guys like talk us through the race and stuff, it's fun to watch. It's pretty cool. And then yeah, no, it's and so yeah, it is disappointing that we won't have that anymore. But yeah, no, well, there's not really much that can be done about it.
Yeah. So Remco, obviously, having real drivers in sim racing was supposed to bring up sim racing effectively, sort of, make it look more serious, really bring up its reputation. But it really seems like over these past couple of weeks, and maybe even before, COVID-19, that because obviously real drivers have been in it before, like it wasn't actually doing that. So maybe just give us like a sim racing perspective of how you see these events happening with real racing drivers. Do you think they're actually benefiting sim racing as a whole? I know we get these odd stories where silly things happen, but overall, do you think it's benefiting, or is it actually just bringing sim racing further down?
Oh, that of course depends. I mean, if you look at previous events where one or two like real racing drivers participated in, we know Max Verstappen and the Norris do that a lot. Those really gain from it, and you can see because everyone else is serious, they themselves are instantly serious as well. And at that moment, everyone who watched those streams like, wait, this is actually fun. But once you force racing drivers onto it and they don't care, then it starts to hurt it because people only see like, oh yeah, it's a game, everyone's simply crashing, and yeah, why do we care? It is just a game. Because what they are showing to the world, for them, it is just a game. But when that sim race, like France once did a 6-hour endurance race in Virtual Endurance Championship, once they jump in there, they can show the world, if you take this serious, it is just as good as real life racing, if not better in some cases. I think that it's just wrongly it's put wrong to the public on how this event was and how serious it is. If it was like shown as a fun event, then it wouldn't have hurt sim racing. But if it was like now it was shown as a real like serious event and the drivers themselves don't take it serious, then everyone notices like, yeah, it is not serious. So at that moment it hurts. Yeah, it's like it's still very difficult.
Yeah, I suppose it goes back. It goes back to this risk reward thing that Formula E did, Ed. In terms of, were they right to get 24 drivers to race? Wouldn't it have been better to sort of, say to the drivers, hey, we're going to put on this sim race, right? If you want to do it, come. But if you lose interest, you can leave, and we'll just, we'll phone up someone. Because if you look at Formula One, right, and what Formula One have done, and, they had Sergio Aguero, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, 2 football players, who, Thibaut Courtois as well, who has been in it pretty consistently. So 3 football players who have turned up. How cool would it have been to raise because at the same time, Formula E need to raise their profile. It's still a baby in terms of a championship, in terms of its publicity. It still needs something to really kickstart it. It's improving, yes, at a gradual rate, 100%. But it's still, they could have taken an opportunity from this to really elevate themselves, and getting someone who is really successful to actually race in one of these series could have been that way to do it if some Formula E drivers actually didn't want to participate anymore. So then they could have looked to bring people like that into the series to keep raising that profile.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm glad that you clarified they were football players, because otherwise I would have had no idea who those people were. So thanks for doing that, which kind of undermines your point. But that's just me being weird and not into football like everyone else is. So yeah, I think Formula One did take the right approach with the virtual Grand Prix. Or is that Veloce who do that? Sorry, but yeah, Formula One, their events where it's sort of they get just whoever really is interested in doing it, and like Formula One. Lewis Hamilton, who's arguably the biggest star that Formula One has right now, has not gone near any of the esports stuff at all. So that sort of shows that it's still being able to be quite successful despite not forcing the biggest names in the championship to do it. And I think it just shows the Formula E that they wanted to replace the fact that they couldn't do real life racing, and that was maybe the wrong mindset. They needed the sim racing thing to sort of be its own thing. It didn't have to as strictly. I mean, using the real life tracks and the similar format, I understand, but it didn't. I feel like it didn't have to as strictly follow real life, and that was maybe where they may have gone slightly astray, in my opinion. But yeah, and yeah, it's real sad that it's led to this controversy, in my opinion. It just shows that it's more easy to be notorious than famous sometimes.
Yeah, Remco, well, it's actually, in terms of, if you watch, not the GP, for example, which is the Veloce esports one, and they've got all the YouTube content creators like Tiamat Marduk and Arava, and, basically all these fun people that have created their content through the Formula One game. Could Formula E have replicated something similar with the sim racers? Because I think it would have been great seeing Formula E drivers in that relaxed environment, having a serious enough race, but you're also, like, you could be on the same team, for example, as Sam Bird, or you could be on the same team as someone, and you actually, a sim race actually gets to know that driver, gets to coach that driver. You see that sort of relationship emerge on Twitch or whatever. Do you think that could have been a real positive way to actually bring the reputation of sim racing up even more?
Definitely. It's just the fun factor should be in there, and if you see drivers having fun, then it's suddenly way more interesting. I've watched the not GP, even though I'm a hardcore sim racer. I enjoy watching like Into the Barotiometer Duck, not because they're driving great, because they don't, but it would have been so much better, and you would have created a way better story and a way more positive story than what's happening right now.
Exactly, and in terms of like the donations and stuff, like, in terms of UNICEF, I know you want it to be serious and you want to have a serious point, Jack, that, this is for UNICEF, but, even having that fun element in it, you don't need to make everything so serious just because you're doing it for a serious charity. You can still have fun doing it. And I think maybe Formula E lost that while doing this championship, and that's what's, escalated into what we're talking about today with Daniel Abt.
Yeah, I think what they did is that they tried to find a fun element, and what they did is they found an element that wasn't that fun in terms of the race royale elimination every lap format, because they thought that'll spice things up, and actually it's the only one of note that I can remember is when Max Gunter was knocked out of the Hong Kong race. So yeah, I mean it doesn't have any real effect on it whatsoever. So they should have they may have looked at that format and say like, yeah, that's great because that's what all the kids are into. Cue that gif of the old guy wearing the backwards cap with the skateboard.
Steve Buscemi, yeah.
Yeah, him.
Hello, fellow kids.
Yes. So yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think that's what they wanted to try to do, and it just hasn't really worked out well. I think, and honestly, I think had they done like a draw of like sim racers and drivers for like each race on like a Thursday, and then have 2 races where there's 12 sim racers, 12 real drivers for both races, I think that would have worked so much better.
Yeah.
It would have spiced it up every weekend as well. But yeah.
No, definitely. But I suppose now the final thing to talk about is Audi. Like, where do they go from here? Like, now you've just got Lucas de Grassi. You've got Kelvin van der Linde as the driver that's probably being touted to finish the season if we do go back racing, Ed. And obviously you've got next season, which, this has really kicked off silly season in a odd sort of way, in a way that you wouldn't expect silly season to start. Because obviously you've got a lot of Audi DTM drivers now who are out of a job because Audi are leaving DTM. And you've got Robin Freins, who obviously is at Envision Virgin Racing, who could easily drop into that seat. Nico Müller from Dragon potentially, and even Rene Rast, who could move into that seat. So where do you think sort of Audi go from here?
Yeah, well, like you said, they've got plenty of options, and even in terms of who's going to fill in Abt's seat for the rest of the sim races season, there are plenty of Audi Audi have got plenty of sim racing guys who they could go to, although none come to my mind immediately at the moment. I have to look it up. But, but yeah, I guess Kelvin van der Linde or as a test driver might fill in. Or
And he's a good sim racer as well, Kelvin van der Linde.
Yes.
He's done a lot on ice racing and has done really well in the streams that I've seen with Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, so you never know.
Yeah, I just feel in a way I'm still a bit hung up on the loss, I guess he's still alive, but the Daniel Abt losing his seat and losing him from Formula E, because I think he was such a character. He's had such a strong presence on social media, and I think Formula E is really gonna miss that, in my opinion.
What, Jack, though, in terms of next season, though, you've got Robin Freins and Nico Müller. Like, I'm just throwing those 2 names out. Obviously, we've got Formula experience. Müller's done a lot of testing. Who would you go for? Would you really shake up the market and take Freins? Because Freins has done exceptionally well, and he's sort of forgotten about in the conversation for Audi. Or would you take Müller, who's sort of been testing the Audi car before he moved Dragon and was sort of tipped to probably take Abt's seat anyway for season 7?
Well, yeah, if I were Audi, I'd take Robin Freins for season 7. For the end of season 6, I'd go for a Loic Duval or Rene Rast or just someone like that, just to fill that seat until the end of the season. I'd then pick up Robin Freins off Envision Virgin, and then Envision Virgin can choose someone else. I mean, yeah, they could choose. They could really choose anyone, to be honest.
Except for Daniel Abt, maybe.
Yeah, maybe no, but I'm certain that Daniel will find his way back into Formula E some way, shape, or form. Maybe Scuderia, but no. If I were Audi, I would nab I would nab Robin Freins next year, and Yeah, that is my yes. You could put Rene Rast in the seat. Rene Rast, I think we didn't see his full potential in season 2 in Berlin when he raced for Team Aguri. Loic Duval's older than Lucas Di Grassi, so it's unlikely. But no, I'd pick Robin Freins.
No, definitely. I would go for me, I think Robin Freins deserves it. Honestly, I really do. But boys, we're rapidly running out of time. It's been a great show, man. I feel like we've talked about so much. I don't know how we've managed to fit it in the time frame. But boys, Edward, Remco, Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Oh, no worries, Jack. Been a pleasure.
Right, remember, if you're enjoying the content, lots of content going out at the moment on YouTube, so please remember to hit that like button and subscribe button. And if you want to come and talk to us, Remco's in the Discord chat. You can talk sim racing to Remco. I'm sure he doesn't mind. He's a nice enough guy. Hit that Discord link. Come and join the community. Thank you so much for watching. You've been watching the FEZ show. We will be back on Friday to preview the next round of the ABB Race at Home Challenge. I'm sure it'll be interesting. And we will see you very soon. Goodbye.